Tanya for the 13th of Teves is at the beginning of Perek Yud Aleph, chapter 11. It's on page 30, and the number at the bottom of the page is 44. In the previous chapter in Perek Yud, the Alter Rebbe explained the difference between the perfect tzaddik and the imperfect tzaddik. In Perek Yud Aleph, the Rebbe will speak about the Rasha, in whom also there are two levels, the complete Rasha and the incomplete Rasha. Perek Yud Aleph. One opposite the other, just as in tzaddik there are two levels. In Rasha also there are two levels. Rasha v'toivlei l'umas tzaddik v'ralei. There's the level of the Rasha who has good, opposite the tzaddik who has bad. Dahainu, what does it mean, a Rasha that has good? Shahatev shebenafshei halikis shebemeichei v'chol ha'imani shebelibei. It means that the good within his soul, the godly soul, which is in the mind and expresses itself in the right side of the heart, the good is overwhelmed and bottled to the evil that is of klipa that's in the left side of the heart. And this too can be subdivided into tens of thousands of degrees. The degrees vary in both the quality and the quantity of the bittul, how much the good is overwhelmed by the evil. There is the individual in whom the good is overwhelmed only a little bit, both in quality and in quantity. So it's overwhelmed a little bit. It is overwhelmed in quality only a little bit, he'll soon explain, and also in quantity it is not often, but it is seldom. It is only at seldom occurrences where the evil overwhelms the good, and captures the body, which is compared to a city. As we said earlier, that the two kings, the godly soul and the animal soul, are fighting over the city. And here the Alter Rebbe says, Mizgaber hara al hatayv, that the evil is stronger than the good. Now, although this person is good almost all the time, and only seldom is the evil expressed in doing a sin, yet this is called evil overcoming the good, stronger than the good. Whereas when the good overcomes the evil, in that most of the time he is doing good, this is not called being stronger than the evil. And that's because when the animal, he is doing something that is diametrically opposed to the godly soul. The godly soul can't tolerate a sin, because the sin is total unholiness, and the godly soul is total holiness. So even if the animal soul gets succeeds in doing a sin even once in a great while, it weakens, it damages the godly soul, because the godly soul is not tolerant at all, can't tolerate a sin. Whereas the fact that the godly soul is most of the time in charge, and most of the time he's doing good, and is not sinning, this is not called weakening the animal soul, because it is not contrary to the animal soul to do mitzvahs. The animal soul doesn't initiate mitzvahs, doesn't seek mitzvahs, doesn't take pleasure in mitzvahs, but it is also not antithetical to the animal soul to do mitzvahs. So that although the animal soul is subdued in that it's not getting what it wants because the godly soul is busy with Torah and mitzvahs, but the Torah and mitzvahs do not damage the animal soul. So it's not called weakening. The animal soul is not weakened by Torah and mitzvahs. unless the love is so intense, as he described earlier, where it overflows from the right side of the heart to the left side of the heart and actually changes the substance of the animal soul. But even in these rare occurrences, when the animal soul overcomes the good and causes the person to sin, even so, it is not all of him that is sinning. Only a part. Meaning to say, it's not in all three garments of thought, speech, and deed, but only in one garment. There's only one part, a small part of the person responds to the animal soul's demands, and that part becomes the vehicle for this unholiness, and a garment for the animal soul to clothe itself in. But what does it clothe? One of its three garments. Which means either he gets the person, the body, to do the sin in action alone, to do a sin, but even there, not a serious sin, but a slight sin, a minor transgression. And that again is the meaning of not causing the sin in any great measure, both in quality or in quantity. So even as he causes him to sin, it is not of a great quality, meaning to say it is not a serious or major sin, and also it is not in all three garments, and that is the quantity that is only one of the three garments that sins. So it's either in action, or bedibur levad, or in speech alone, ledaber avak loshen hara v'litzonus u'chai gavna, to speak that which borders on loshen hara, or on light-headedness u'chai gavna. So that's in speech. Ei b'machshava levad, or in thought alone. And even if he sins in thought alone, this is called overcoming the good. The evil is overcoming the good, because because the thought of sin is in a sense worse than the sin itself. Because thought is a more delicate garment, the damage is greater. Or another reason is because in action a person will sin only so much, whereas in thought he can be sinning all the time. And even though he's not thinking about a sin in the sense that he wants to do it, that he's planning to do it, even then it is called sinning. He's merely thinking immodest thoughts without planning, without the thought of doing it. In that alone, he already transgresses the warning of Torah, where it says, that we have to guard ourselves from evil, not to think unholy thoughts. So that even though it is not yet an act of a sin, it itself is already a transgression, because we're transgressing the protecting ourselves and the guarding ourselves from evil. Or it's a time when he could be sitting and studying Torah, and instead he wastes the time, he turns his heart to vain things. As we learned in Oves, that a person who stays up at night and wastes his time, is empty-hearted, that is an unholy condition. In doing any of these things, whether it's in action alone, in speech alone, or in thought alone, Nikra Rasha be'esahi, he is called a Rasha at that moment. Why? Shaharasha benafshe, because at that moment the evil in him, Gever Bey, is dominant and is strong, umislabish begufe umachtiye umetame, and is able to take control of the body to cause it to sin and to become tummy. So he's called a Rasha, but he's called a Rasha v'teiv lei. Because achar kach dever behatev shebenafshe holikis, after he commits the sin, either in action or in speech or in thought, his godly soul regains control, and he regrets what he did, and he requests, he begs for forgiveness, and God does forgive him. If he does his tshuva, and it's an appropriate tshuva, following the advice of the sages, as Rabbi Yishmael taught that there are three levels or three types of tshuva, and if he does the proper tshuva, he is forgiven. So this is called a Rasha v'Teivlei. He is a Rasha because the evil overcomes the good infrequently, and then the good is still there, Teivlei, he has good, and the good immediately regrets the sin and brings him to tshuva, and he is forgiven. And even so, after being forgiven, he is still called a Rasha, because at any time he could sin again. So although he's forgiven for this sin, he is still in a position where he is available to sin, even if it's infrequent. Then there is a person in whom the evil is dominant more often and to a greater degree. Where all three garments are used for sinning. It's not just the quantity of the garments. All three of them are involved in the sin, but it's also the quality of the sin. In this person, his animal soul gets him to do more serious sins, and also more frequently. But still, in between, in the interval, he regrets. He has thoughts of regret and of tshuva coming from the good within his godly soul, that to some degree regains control in the interval between the sins. But he doesn't have enough strength in his goodness to overcome, to be victorious against the evil, to completely stop sinning, to admit his sin and to abandon the sin. He doesn't have that strength. And concerning this, the sages say that that the wicked, the sinful, are full of regrets. And this is a description of the average Rasha. In whom there still exists some good. So the good can either be dominant most of the time and be overwhelmed by the evil only on rare occasion. Even so, he is a Rasha and he has good. But in the same category, there is also the person who is sinning often, maybe even most of the time. But in between sins, he does have thoughts of regret and of tshuva, coming from the good within his godly soul. But the person who never regrets, he never has thoughts of tshuva, Nikra Rasha Verale. He is called a Rasha Verale. Shahara Shebenafshe Hu Levade Nisha Bekirbe. And the Rebbe translates Ra'alei, meaning to say that all he has left is his evil. Ki Gov Kol Kachal Hateiv, because the evil has so overwhelmed the good, Ad Shenistalik Mekirbe, until it's been removed from within him. There is no longer any good within him. And the goodness, the godly soul, is now standing apart from the person and surrounds him from the outside, from above. And that's why the sages say that wherever there are 10 Jews, the Shekhinah rests, even if there are 10 complete Rasha. Even there, if all 10 of them are in the level of Rasha V'Ra'aloi, because even the Rasha V'Ra'aloi, where the good has completely left from within him, but it hasn't abandoned him completely. It is no longer within him, but it is still around him. So that when you have 10 Jews together, no matter what level they're on, the presence of this godliness causes the Shekhinah to rest, to be present. And that's because goodness is always stronger than evil. So that in the evil, when the godly soul overcomes the animal soul, it is completely removed and undone. It becomes godliness. There is no evil left. Whereas in godliness, good is stronger than evil. Even when the evil overcomes the good, it cannot destroy it. It can't transform it into evil. And the neshama remains even in the person who is a rasha v'ra'aloi. Only it is not conscious within the person. It's not an internal thing. It has removed itself to the outside and it hovers above the person, so to speak. In the Hayom Yom for the 13th of Teves, the Rebbe writes that where a lantern is placed, where you light a candle, those who seek light are attracted and they gather round, because light attracts.